This is your world, so you can do anything that you want to do. Anything that you want to do.
But really, that's one of the big problems with D&D world building, isn't it? You can literally make and do anything, but how much of it is really truly necessary? If you were a normal person, you'd probably look to authors or maybe even screenwriters to solve this sort of dilemma, but I prefer to infer it from the secret hidden advice Bob Ross put in his videos just for us. You do have to play it backwards though. So today, with the help of Bob Ross himself, we're gonna cover 5 tips to help make your world more immersive and engaging for your players with the joy of world building method.
This is an 18 by 24 canvas. This is a double primed pre-stretched canvas. And I've covered it with a nice thin even coat of the liquid white, which makes it wet, makes it slick. It allows us to actually blend color right here on the canvas.
I don't think it would surprise anyone if I said that high-level decisions matter a whole lot when it comes to world building, aka laying down your nice even coat of liquid white. But even more important than deciding on the big ideas about your world is deciding why you want to world build. And this can seem like a really stupid question, except that it's not. Because you see, sometimes people don't really realize that what they want from world building is to really just have almost a solo play type of game for themselves. They might say that they want to run a game for their friends with this world they're building, but the fact that it's been about 7 years since they started talking about this to everyone kind of suggests otherwise. And that's totally okay. If you just enjoy tinkering with world building concepts and doodling maps and building out pantheons, take the pressure off of yourself. Deciding that you want to world build because you have all of these cool ideas bouncing around in your head and you want to see how they play out at the table, that's going to lead to a very different focus compared to solo world building as a fun activity. So, if you want to build a world that pulls your players right in, laying down your coat of liquid white is going to make it so that all of the other decisions you have to make along the way come a lot easier. And what you'll want to do is start by deciding on your mood, your theme, and the genre you're going to be building around. So your mood is the overarching tone of your campaign. If I'm imagining a grimdark campaign, a great mood word to use is right in the descriptor. Grim. It's important to note really quickly that this doesn't mean that every moment should lead to despair and hopelessness for your PCs. You still need both up and down beats to keep things interesting, but this tells me that I want the lows to feel particularly nasty. It tells me that this is probably going to be a combat-heavy campaign, or if I want a political intrigue campaign, it's going to focus around a lot of corruption, amorality, that sort of stuff. And for some people in campaigns, the mood can be kind of interchangeable with the theme, but I like to think of the theme as a subset of mood. So our mood tone is kind of our general overview, and then the theme delves into specifics that we're going to use to build encounters around. So some themes to explore in a grimdark campaign might include things like cannibalism, amorality, futility. And so you'll want to start thinking about what kind of encounters kind of build on that theme. How do they reinforce it? And while genre is usually pretty easy to just pick and move on with your life, the reason I think it's important is because having a clear idea about the genres or mix of genres you'd like to include will help you pull from and subvert certain types of tropes in those genres. It makes it a lot easier to set up the PCs for really cool story moments, and also to kind of switch things up and take a hard turn away from something if they're kind of getting through things too easily. So you can use it to both play up things and to surprise your players. And while you're setting up your world building canvas, you'll also want to decide on your color palette. And Bob Ross uses a pretty limited color palette, and we're going to too. The way I think about what picking your color palette is in D&D and other TTRPGs is about being intentional with the character creation choices that we give to our players. So when I'm starting a campaign, not only do I customize the choices for species, classes, and backgrounds, but I'll even rewrite certain sections once I finish world building so that it fits what I imagine my world is a lot better. I kind of work on customizing these things for my players and my games. This is because WotC might imagine elves as one way, but I might imagine them as another in my world, and I want my players to be able to pick up on that and build off of what my elves are like. This gives you very fine-tuned control of the plot hooks you're offering up for your players during that creation process. Because the options they pick for their characters are going to majorly influence the things that they do throughout the course of their campaign. When our players are first introduced to our world, it's usually through session zeros and character creation guidelines. So you have to remember that they don't know what kind of ideas are percolating behind the scenes in our brain. And I have an older video that I'll link to below and at the end of this video, but this is your big chance to set up really cool story moments for your players. So make sure they have access to the color palette that you'd like to use.
Let's have some fun. Let's get crazy here. I'm gonna take the bright red, a little yellow ochre, a little Indian yellow. Just drop in some happy little things. Once again, worry about patterns, shapes. Think about limbs in there.
So one of the biggest hangups that I see when people talk about world building is that they're focused on building everything out. And I think it's totally fine to have a bunch of ideas about what you'd like to do in different areas, but you don't need to spend entire years fleshing things out just so you'll feel prepared to run a campaign. Especially because there are a ton of areas that your players might not even visit. So not everything has to be finished for you to get your players started. In fact, in one of my next tips, I'll talk about why maybe you shouldn't even have everything finished. But the only place you really need all of these details is for where your players are currently at and where they can be in under a day. That's it. For my homebrew version of the Feywild, my players literally stayed in the same area for at least 10 sessions. And that's because all of the good plot hooks I planted were local. When I was ready for them to branch out, I started creating more interesting plot hooks that were further and further away from the village of Crowside. And so for each area of my Feywild, I literally just had a few bullet points kind of detailing interesting story ideas, potential plot hooks, NPCs, but just that, bullet points, nothing really fleshed out. And then once they started becoming accessible as they moved through these areas, that's when I took the time to do this work. And it made it a lot more manageable, kind of chunking it up like that. And I think a really important thing to remember that you as the DM, you control the flow of these things. You control the types of opportunities that pop up for your PCs. I also think that one of the problems contributing to this is the idea that bigger is always better, and that having this massive world with a tome's worth of lore somehow means that you are doing a great job. But I'd like to challenge you to think about stories you enjoy and their scope. Because sure, there's things like Lord of the Rings with Middle-earth, but there's also Hogwarts. 99% of the things that happen in the Harry Potter series happen at Hogwarts, a school, a singular school. So keep in mind that bigger doesn't necessarily mean more interesting.
Go out and talk to a tree. Make friends with it. Spend some time looking at trees. See what makes them work. Why do they look the way they look?
Another thing that can happen when you start world building is that you can get kind of sucked into these high level ideas, but lose focus of what they really mean to your players. Sure, that city-state is renowned for their powerful warriors. So what? What does that mean to them? Why should your players care? So if you see this happening when you're doing your world building, it's time to talk to your trees. But if they don't really have anything to say, try talking to your NPCs instead. So this is my weird campaign world building pro tip. Whenever you're not sure if what part of the world you're working on is really interesting or unique, or really providing players with actual things to do, try telling a story instead. But seriously, say you're not really sure where to start with factions in an area. Start with stories or legends about people in your world and the things they're doing, instead of just tossing around ideas for a Merchant's Guild concept. And eventually at some point, along with the other videos I owe you guys, I will be making a more in-depth faction creation video. But creating these stories about NPCs or historical figures in your area early on will start helping you see where potential interesting plot hooks might be. It'll bring a lot more life to things like magic items, ideas about ongoing conflicts, stuff like that. And if you'd like to see this particular NPC again, make sure to like and subscribe to see more videos from me.
The way to learn how to paint is to be relaxed and enjoy and just let it go. Things work better for you when you're relaxed and you're really happy with what you're doing.
Another piece of Bob Ross advice that I think a lot of D&D world builders could benefit from is to let your world breathe. And by that, I mean we should all release the death grip we have on our little baby world and maybe consider relinquishing control a bit. A lot of people worry that players might break their worlds. But the thing is, once you start a campaign, it's no longer your world. It becomes an our world situation. It becomes collaborative. Because our players will inevitably influence things in the world. That's kind of the whole point of TTRPGs versus novel writing. So take inspiration from your players. Walk away from any ideas that you have that are totally set in stone and get ready to go with the flow a bit. Have fun with it. I think world building gets 20 times cooler when DMs leave space for the players to kind of contribute ideas through play. It's important to remember that we as DMs have a lot of tools to influence the choices that players are making, and also that there isn't anything that we can't just touch up and alter as we go along. So, take a deep breath, and most importantly, remember,
We don't make mistakes. We just have happy accidents.
the most important Bob Ross lesson of all is learning not to take all of this too seriously. This is a game, guys. It's supposed to be fun. Have more fun. When you chill out a bit, anything that could have been viewed as a mistake, like accidentally switching NPCs or not being prepared for what your very chaotic player was going to do, suddenly those moments become moments of opportunity. So learn to see the potential, because ultimately, who cares if you got something wrong?
If it doesn't work the way you want it, it's not failure. It just means you learned something.
This isn't supposed to be stressful or life-consuming. Take a note from Bob Ross and enjoy the process. And if it's other people who aren't being chill, don't worry. Bob knows what to do with them.
Beat the devil out of it, and we're ready.
So hopefully these world building tips will help you guys turn this into a quick, fun process that helps you get your campaigns to your players ASAP. And don't forget to check out these videos next.